Um, Prabhaki. Jaya Shiva Paramahansa Parirakachari Shotashat Shishiman Visalangas AC Bhaktivinoda Swami Shiva Prabhaki. Jaya Shiva Paramahansa Parirakachari Shotashat Shishiman Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhaki. Gaur Premanande. Hare Krishna. Little babies, happy Sunday. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 4, Text 7. Hamsaguya prayers. Nadrimebhyo Mahabhaga Dinebhyo Drogdam Arhata Vivartayishyavo Yuyam Prajanam Pataya Smitaha Nadrumebhyo Mahabhaga Dinebhyo Drogdam Arhata Vivartayishyavo Yuyam Prajanam Pataya Smitaha Nadrumebhyo Mahabhaga Dinebhyo Drogdam Arhata Vivartayishyavo Yuyam Prajanam Pataya Smitaha. Does anyone online want to give it a go?
Hare Krishna. Nadrumebhyo Mahabhaga Dinebhyo Drodum Arhata Vivarhai Dasavo Yudam Rajanam Prataya Smitaha.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, word for word. Na, not. Drumebhya, the trees. Mahabhaga, O greatly fortunate ones. Dinebhya, who are very poor. Drogtum, to burn to ashes. Arhata, you deserve. Vivardhayashavaha, desiring to bring about an increase. Yuyam, you. Prajanam, of all living entities who have taken shelter of you. Pataya, the masters or protectors. Smritaha, known as. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the Prabhupada Ki Jai. Let's fix this real quick. Okay, it'll stay. Translation, O greatly fortunate ones, you should not kill these 4 trees by burning them to ashes. Your duty is to wish the citizens, prajas, all prosperity, and to act as their protectors. Purport. It is indicated herein that the government or king has the duty of protecting not only the human beings, but all other living entities, including animals, trees, and plants. No living entity should be killed unnecessarily. Translation again, O greatly fortunate ones, you should not kill these poor trees by burning them to ashes. Your duty is to wish the citizens, prajas, all prosperity and to act as their protectors. Om Jnana-timanandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna again, everyone. Nice to have everyone on Zoom. So I was just thinking this morning that this Prabhupada keeps making this point about governments and the duty of the king so many times throughout all the chapters of the sixth canto that we've been reading in the purports. I don't know if anyone else has noticed, or at least we've had a lot of classes on the topic. But yeah, it seems like Prabhupada has mentioned it quite a few times. And I was just thinking about how far out of a concept that is in today's world, that it's the duty of the government or the king. Well, on the one side is to arrange society in such a way that they can be uplifted and live in the human body in a proper and bona fide way according to the Vedas, but also create such an atmosphere that they can be uplifted spiritually. So that's one side. And then the other side, or the other main point, is that their responsibility is to protect all living entities, not just the human beings. And of course, the 2 points go together. But yeah, these are the two things that Prabhupada really drives home as the responsibility of government. And neither are happening nowadays, or at least if they are superficially being said to be happening, like, there's some, I don't even, could you call it a theocracy, I guess? Some countries that are still run as a theocracy, or like the last remnants of a theocracy are there, or countries that are, yeah, supposedly based on religious principles, but behind the scenes, while that's going on the surface level, behind the scenes, there's actually so much selfish desire behind that by the government heads. So we know that, yeah, them trying to uplift us spiritually is not part of the equation nowadays. Yeah, it's quite the opposite. It's an atmosphere of exploitation and duplicity that, politicians will say whatever they need to be able to get into office, make all kinds of campaign promises. And even some acknowledge this, that after they're elected, um, they'll say, or they're giving false promises on the premise that, well, I can't I can't make any changes until I get into office. So I have to, it's right of me, it's morally sound of me to say whatever I need to get into office, and then I can benefit the people, even though initially I was cheating them. So it's really like yeah, the mind can concoct all kinds of false moral principles just to arrange for our own sense gratification. And I was hearing one just randomly, one former presidential candidate in the past couple of years was in an interview, and he was saying that essentially the US is becoming more and more like I think it's called an oligarchy, right? Where it's like essentially money plays such a huge role in the government. So the interviewer was asking, is the US, would you even still consider it a democracy? And they were like, yes and no, because yeah, whoever wants to can run for a political post, theoretically. But if one candidate has 10 times the amount of money as the other one, you know that that person with 10 times the amount of money is going to win. Um, so, and this is this rift between the super rich and the super poor is becoming more and more prominent. So in that way, he was saying, I believe oligarchy is the right word, is what he said. So yeah, things are really becoming all twisted, and even what um I guess the global hegemons or the Western world that considers democracy to be the ultimate morality in terms of government, that even that's fading. So this Kali Yuga is just becoming more and more degraded. Hang on. Okay. Anyway, I had a bunch of different things that I wanted to talk about. So that's the one side, right? Is that they're not trying to spiritually uplift us. It's more of an exploitation system. And then the other side of it, like I was saying, is that Prabhupada is repeatedly saying that it's the duty of the government to protect all living entities, not just the human beings. Even in terms of just protecting the human beings, that's not even going on spiritually, as we just said, but even materially, like in the US, old people, right? They're just like out of sight, out of mind. Let's put them all in old age homes and yeah, just close the door, put them all in a facility, and we don't have to face the reality of old age, let alone death, which occurs everywhere, but in places like hospitals, disease like that. And then, of course, there's such an increase in the amount of abortions as well. So even the human beings are not being protected materially. And Prabhupada, I, I um I had this thing that I made, this like a Prabhupada dictionary. So all like in Bhagavad Gita, even just in Bhagavad Gita alone, Prabhupada has so many definitions for words. He says, for example, I'll read part of this verse, but in Bhagavad Gita 10, text 4 to 5, he says, like, what's an example? Samatha, equanimity means this, and then like, yeah, gives so many definitions. So I had a book that I would write of all Prabhupada's, like, whenever he says this means this, and I would say 99% of it were nothing like what you would find in the Merriam-Webster dictionary version. It's just so interesting to see how Prabhupada's like completely shifting our whole conception, and he's giving us his own Prabhupada dictionary. So yeah, in one purport in Bhagavad Gita, in one place, Prabhupada's saying that ahimsa, nonviolence, means to not arrest the progressive life of any living entity. So they should not be killed untimely. And mm, yeah, so I wanted to read part of this purport from, I'm sure everybody's familiar with this, Bhagavad Gita 10, text 4 to 5. But in that, so the verse is intelligence, knowledge, freedom from doubt and delusion, forgiveness, truthfulness, self-control and calmness, pleasure and pain, birth, death, fear, fearlessness, nonviolence, equanimity, satisfaction, austerity, charity, fame, and infamy are created by me alone. So then, yeah, Prabhupada goes through intelligence, refers to the power of analyzing things in proper perspective. Knowledge is understanding what is spirit and what is matter. So he gives so many definitions. And then in one paragraph, he talks all about ahimsa. He says, ahimsa, nonviolence, means that one should not do anything which will put others into misery or confusion. Material activities that are promised by so many politicians, sociologists, philanthropists, etc., do not produce very good results because the politicians and philanthropists have no transcendental vision. They do not know what is actually beneficial for human society. Ahimsa means that people should be trained in such a way that the full utilization of the human body can be achieved. The human body is meant for spiritual realization, so any movement or any commissions which do not further that end commit violence on the human body. That which furthers the future spiritual happiness of the people in general is called nonviolence. So there's a lot here. I mean, every sentence is like a whole Bhagavatam class or series of Bhagavatam classes in and of itself. But I found it interesting that Prabhupada makes the point in this purport in Bhagavad Gita, also going back to this idea of government, or I guess what would be the Brahminical class traditionally, um, that they're not producing any good results because they don't have the proper premise, they don't have the proper vision to begin with. So he's saying material activities that are promised by so many politicians, sociologists, philanthropists, etc., do not produce very good results because they do not have transcendental vision. They don't know what's actually beneficial for human society. So I was thinking, imagine like um, somebody wants to like operate on you and they have very good intentions, they're like, oh, you have a heart problem. Um, I would really love to help you. And um, and a lot of politicians even, or sociologists, philanthropists, whoever, they, in a way, of course, we know as devotees that it's all extended sense gratification, but they might have a sense of, yeah, they actually want to help others, do good for others. And that is a higher level than, just thinking of my own gross sense gratification. But if they're working on the wrong premise, just like if somebody wants to operate on you, but they're actually their premise is that they watched 11 seasons of Grey's Anatomy, or they, if you don't know what Grey's Anatomy is, like anyway, like a medical kind of soap opera thing, then they might have good intentions and they might really love you and want to help you, but their whole premise, their whole foundation of knowledge is completely off. So in the same way, modern society, or these so-called leaders of society, might have materially good intentions or be well-wishing, but if their whole foundation of knowledge is flawed, then they're actually going to do more harm than good. And yeah, I was thinking of Prabhupada, how he made this point in multiple places, and I actually have one lecture that I just kind of wanted to read a bit from, or like summarize, that he says that there's like four classes of men, essentially, that there's the uh lazy intelligent, busy intelligent, lazy fool, and am I getting that right? And busy fool. So the best one is first, he says first class man is lazy intelligent. He says, just like you'll see the high court judges, they are very lazy and most intelligent. That is first class man. They are doing everything very soberly. And then the next class, busy intelligent. Intelligence should be used very, oh, sorry. Busy, where is it? Sorry. They are doing, in the next class, busy intelligent. Intelligence should be used very soberly. And the third class, lazy fool. Lazy at the same time, fool. And the fourth class, busy fool. Busy fool is very dangerous. So all these people, they're busy, even in this country, everywhere, all over the world, not this country or that country. They have discovered this horseless carriage, very busy. Oh, and then Prabhupada imitates car noise. This way, this way, this way, this way. Actually, they are not intelligent, busy fool. Therefore, they are creating problems after problems. That is a fact. They're so busy, but because they're fools, therefore they are creating problems. So, and he, in multiple places, yeah, I mean, there's at least, if you look it up on database, there or funny quotes, there's like at least 10 conversations or lectures where Prabhupada is making this point about these four classes of men. And then he would also make the point, that that's actually, he brings Darwinism into it a lot, like mentions Darwinism quite a few times as an example of busy fool. But also we can see nuclear arms are a great example of that too, that they're foolish, so the whole premise is wrong. They're using their human form of life um, not in a proper way, but they're so active and so busy that they use all that foolish energy and put it into uh yeah, destructive, self-destructive things. And Prabhupada also makes that point in the Bhagavad Gita, specifically about yeah, creating weapons and nuclear armaments. That it's in what's that point? He's talking about the modes of material nature and ignorance. Is it was it about austerity in passion or ignorance? I can't remember. I can look it up later, or somebody at the end, or can type it in the chat, which purport that's in, or what Prabhupada's discussing, or what's in the verse, and then Prabhupada talks about that in the purport. So anyway, going back to yeah, the point. Oh, so Prabhupada's saying, going back to Bhagavad Gita, 4 to 5, Prabhupada says at the end of that paragraph that I read in the purport that that which furthers the future spiritual happiness of the people in general is called nonviolence. So this is a pretty crazy conception of nonviolence, or Prabhupada's definition of nonviolence, that you won't even find if, like, for example, in yoga teacher training, maybe Lila Kishori knows as well, that if they maybe they have you read a book about the yamas and niyamas if you're lucky, I guess, or they just talk about it. But even the definitions in like kind of pop spiritual books, like yamas and niyamas books, um, this isn't even included really in the definition of ahimsa, nonviolence, which would be one of the niyamas, right? That this aspect of not of doing things that assist or help people come closer to spiritual life is actually nonviolence. Even even my was my mom doing yoga teacher training? I can't remember, something like that. But her yoga teacher friend gave her a book, the yamas and niyamas as well. And the part about ahimsa and nonviolence, it didn't even mention anything about not eating meat, like let alone helping somebody to advance spiritually. I was shocked. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is becoming so like, or in my yoga teacher training too, that they talk about yamas and niyamas, and because the teachers both, no, I think one of them ate meat. Um, that yeah, they weren't going to bring up that point that that's like one of the core, the principal aspects of ahimsa. So anyway, you could just see things are getting so watered down, and how we shape things. I mean, even as trying, you know, people trying to practice bhakti, of course, we can also just like take the shastra and twist it, and or cherry pick and twist it in a way that suits our sense gratification. That's just the tendency of being in this material world. But I always found that point really uh, very illustrative of, yeah, how things are just getting so watered down in terms of any Vedic teachings. So yeah, going back to this point of real ahimsa is helping to yeah, give people spiritual knowledge, helping them to advance spiritually. I was thinking about that the movie The Matrix, um, which has a lot of good examples in it, like that more in a modern context uh, illustrate points about that are spoken about in the Vedas, also in like Buddhism. But I was thinking about, imagine, we're in the matrix of the material world. And if we just like, if any of you have seen that movie, I haven't, I think I watched it once after reading Hiding in a Natural Happiness, and I'm like, oh, maybe I should watch this movie. But basically, the main character's name, Keanu Reeves, is Neo, right? So if he has knowledge, like he's seen the other sides, so to speak, he's been out of the matrix and see the actual reality of what's going on, that we're all in like a simulation or machine or whatever you want to call it. I might not be getting all the details right, but And then he goes back into the illusion, the matrix. And then if he just goes around, like he has this knowledge, but if he just goes around, affirming everyone's illusion. So he's meeting all these people that are in complete illusion, and he's just affirming, like, oh yeah, you actually are um, a blonde person, or you actually are a barista, or you actually, then it's actually furthering their false conception. So in this way, it's actually violence. Whereas if he were to, be like, this is not, try to educate them with some knowledge, well, two things could happen. Either he does help them, or they just become even more resistant and very angry and very disturbed, which also, yeah, we're not to do. So applying this to a devotional context is that really, if we just go around either in our relationships with devotees, or yeah, in the world, and we're not in some way or other trying to give people Krishna in whatever capacity that is. That could be just by your example, that could be giving them prasadam, that could be, I mean, if somebody's ready for it, like that could be like straight up, yeah, give them books or preach them or whatever, if somebody's like really a sponge and receptive and asking questions. So whatever capacity is there, like Prabhupada says in Bhagavad Gita, we don't want to unnecessarily disturb others, but at the same time, in our minds, there should always be this thought of how can I actually help to bring this person even one step, 1 centimeter closer to Krishna. So, but yeah, if we don't have this at least in the back of our minds, again, even in our relationships with devotees or whoever, then it's actually just furthering that other person's bodily concept of life, and yeah, sinking both both parties deeper into illusion because we have knowledge. So then to keep that all that knowledge to ourselves, and again, that doesn't mean just outright like, hey, did you know you're not this body and you're in Maya? And like that doesn't mean that. But we have knowledge of the potency of prasadam. We have knowledge of the potency of, yeah, people just watching how our example can change other people's hearts and make them inquisitive. We have knowledge of how these things affect others. So if we're not acting on that knowledge, then it's actually committing violence to ourselves and the other party. That's my point. So yeah, and I was thinking like every time you do act in a beneficial way, or again just by example, or give people prasadam, give them a book, invite them to the temple or program or whatever, then you're like, whether they know it or not, you're kind of like giving them a little taste of the other side, so to speak. So you're giving them a taste of reality. And some people might be completely oblivious to that. And some people might be like, whoa, there's something very special about prasadam's a great example, right? Or the Maha Mantra Kirtan like that. That there's something or even devotional service. Man, I remember this one well, anyway, I'll finish this point and then I'll tell you this example. So, yeah, you're secretly giving them a taste of the other side. And so it's like whetting their appetite, or at least helping them to advance some extent in this life. If they honor prasadam in this life, somehow or other, even if they get an animal body, they'll be able to have prasadam in their next life. If they know it's prasadam and they're in a human body and they don't make offenses, then they'll get a human body in the next life. Anyway, this example I wanted to give about, it's not always just like prasadam or the Maha Mantra or a book or something like that, but even just through engaging people in devotional service, like we have Dana here now, for example, who, I mean, she knows some about bhakti because she's come to some of the programs and is generally like she says, she's an open-minded kind of person. But her main connection with bhakti is through devotional service and through the devotees as well. But I was thinking this one, or it just popped into my head, this one example of this back when I was in New Zealand at Bhakti Lounge, we would have before the book marathons, we would have like a book uh, wrapping, stacking, ribboning mission. Um, I'm trying to think of what's like the US equivalent of mission. Like they always say like if you're like running errands or something like, oh, I'm going on a mission, like sounds intense. But anyway, it was a mission. And so we'd have a whole day where we'd invite, a bunch of friends of Krishna and yeah, just I mean, people that had come to Bhakti Lounge that were just favorable or devotees or whoever. And it'd be really nice. We'd lay out all the books, like imagine the whole temple room, and we put down, cloths and lay out all the books and stack them and then ribbon them and just like hang out, play kirtan, and then we have prasad. And then usually we would not be done, so then we'd have to ribbon more. And then by then everybody would leave, and then there's like two people left to take all the book boxes back downstairs. But anyway, there's this one girl from the US that I was attempting to befriend or cultivate, I guess. And what was her name? I think her name was Emily. And she loved coming to Bhakti Lounge. Yeah, she was all about it. And but she had a partner, a boyfriend, I think. I don't think they were married. And I invited her to come to this book wrapping mission. And she was all for it. And she's like, oh, can I bring my partner? And I was like, yeah, of course. So he came and they were there for a few hours and they were helping stack books. And then we took prasadam, lunch prasadam. And I was just, trying to make friends with him as well. Super nice guy. And yeah, he was just, the more we talked, the more he was opening up. He's like, I haven't wanted to come here and he would stay at home like a lot of the day and pretty much like play video games. I think he did a little bit of work or something like that, which was also shocking because he looked like a very like, put together like spiffy kind of guy. But then come to find out he's basically like not coming to Bhakti Lounge or not like yeah, doing things with her because he's like playing World of Warcraft pretty much all day. So anyway, he's like, I wanted to get out of the house, so I came here. He's like, I was honestly really skeptical about this place. Like, I didn't know what the premise was or like who's behind it. He could just sense that there was like something deeper than just like a music and food kind of place. So he said he was hesitant, but now that he was there, he liked it, and he said as soon as he sat down to take prasad, he was like, "Man, I don't know what just happened, but I am so satisfied." Like he wasn't eating the prasad, but he was just sitting there and saying like something about that book stacking, like I am just so satisfied. And he was in such shock and amazement. Like, yeah, he was like, there's something about this place is definitely different because that was really yeah, really crazy. And that just really struck me. I was so amazed. Sometimes at least for myself as a devotee, like can take devotional service for granted and the potency and the satisfaction that it brings. But here was somebody completely, skeptical, didn't even really want to come to Bhakti Lounge, but his girlfriend dragged him. And whether he wanted or not, Lord Chaitanya was giving him, some taste for devotional service. Similarly, I'm sure there's examples at Gita Nagari as well, but uh, there's people at Mantra Lounge and people in Atlanta and people at Bhakti Lounge that they would come for years, refuse to chant, but they love doing the dishes. They would come like 3 times a week just to the dishes. They'd be angry if anybody took that service from them. They're just so attached to that service. But then I would try to get them to, I'd be like, hey, Hare Krishna. And they're like, hey, they refuse to say it. So yeah, some way or other, Krishna, Lord Chaitanya will give us a taste of the other side, so to speak, of the reality. Um, okay. Yeah, one interesting point actually that I was thinking or remembering just on this point of the government should be protecting all living entities is that well, obviously we know that this material world is based on envy. That's why we're here. But in one, I was hearing David Maurice recount this. It was a morning walk, I believe, with Srila Prabhupada, where Prabhupada was walking with the disciples, and he asked, like, what's the highest pleasure in this world? And the devotees were like thinking that they learned from Bhagavatam. They're like, oh, it's sex pleasure. And so then Prabhupada, Prabhupada kind of had this like, I don't even know. I mean, I can't say exactly what the look was, but it was kind of like a mischievous kind of look, or like a little smirk. And then he kept asking, he was asking again, well, okay, what's the highest pleasure? And devotees are giving the same answer. They're like, this is the right answer. But I think then they started to like catch on to Prabhupada's mood, that Prabhupada was about to make some kind of point or joke or whatever. And then Prabhupada said, actually, it's killing. That's the highest pleasure in this material world. And devotees are like, what? But yeah, that essentially it's like the ultimate form of envy, because you're saying, I get to live and you die, like at the expense of this other person. And there's so many accounts of people who have, yeah, murdered others, and they're like, oh my gosh, it's such a rush, like you completely lose yourself, like it's the most absorbing thing ever, where it's like an out of body experience, which is the same thing that people are, yeah, trying to get out of sex pleasure. But so many murders have said it's like even more absorbing than that. It was such a rush of adrenaline. So yeah, that's like the highest form of envy, and it's arresting the progressive life of another living entity. And we can see it, like, at first, whenever I heard this point explained to me that, oh, meat eating is envy. I'm like, what? No, it's not. I just could not connect the two. But it is along this same point, is that, oh, I get to, I'm the controller, I'm the enjoyer. This whole world is actually centered around me. And any other living entity, any animate or inanimate object is meant for my enjoyment. So David Maurice Mirage was giving the example, like at Thanksgiving, people are like, oh, would you like the white meat or the dark meat? Like this and that. It's like, ugh, I'm thinking about it as a devotee. It's like, but that's what it is. It's like, ooh, I get to choose how I enjoy this living entity that has been killed for my tongue. Um, and yeah, it's so twisted. And you could see that's like the lowest reflection of the highest principle, or higher principle in the spiritual world, that everyone's actually united and non-envious. Um, except for, I mean, one can make a point for the jealousy between the gopis, but I'm not going to go into that now. But that, everybody's um, working together, even if they seem at odds in the spiritual world, they're still working together in a sense for the pleasure of Krishna, or performing that pastime, or having those moods or those relationships, um, all for the pleasure of Krishna. So yeah, what a crazy basis for anything, is that every single person in this material world, like even a baby, thinks that they are the center of the universe, and everything is meant for our enjoyment. So if somebody says something that we don't like, they breathe a certain way that we don't like, or they have qualities that we feel like are superior to ours, usually what comes into the heart is envy, um, because we're thinking, well, this doesn't tally with my whole conception, why I left the spiritual world in the first place, that I'm the center of the universe and this is all meant for me. So if somebody is prettier or more renounced or more intelligent or more strong or whatever than me, and immediately that envy comes in, and we just want to belittle them and find out what's wrong with them, so that we could push them down and lift ourselves up, because that upholds the whole conception that Oh, right, right, right. Okay, now I feel that now that I found some fault in them that they actually um yeah, they might be super strong, but actually their fingernails look really weird or whatever. And then it's like, oh, thank goodness, I am still the center of the universe. I am still the best at this or that or the other. Um, or even the point can be made like the most fallen, the worst, like something where we're just like the at the peak of whether it's a positive thing or a negative thing. um, that we can, through envy, we feel like we can maintain that conception, which is actually at the root of it is a very painful conception to maintain that, okay, I'm the center of the universe because we really can't control much and we really can't even enjoy much, which is embarrassing. So, hmm, maybe I'll just stop there actually, because I mean, there's so many examples too in the Bhagavatam that I wanted to go through. I was reading about the pastime between Lord Shiva and Prajapati Daksha, and how well, I'll just say a little bit about that pastime. I mean, there's so many examples of envy in the Bhagavatam, and I was gonna ask you guys, like everybody, give examples, but I don't know that we have time. But I mean, there's like, yeah, Daksha and Shiva. There's Chitraketu's wives, killing his son. There's the family of the Avanti Brahmana and the Ila Gita that are just super envious of him and like, yeah, do all kinds of like spit on him and everything. I mean, Dhritarashtra is a great example for Hiranyakashipu. So Dhruva's, would that be his stepmom? I don't know if that's technically what it was, if it's like a co-wife, but anyway, the really, really good one, and Prabhupada makes so many good points in all the purports, even in like the first couple verses of that chapter of Daksha cursing Lord Shiva, which is in the fourth canto, I think. Um, where yeah, so essentially Daksha is, wait, uh is he having the sacrifice? I can't remember. But anyway, so Daksha, or sorry, everybody's sitting in this assembly. Daksha comes in and Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma they don't stand up because Brahma is Daksha's father. And I mean, Lord Shiva is just an exalted personality. So Lord Shiva doesn't stand up to offer his respects, and Daksha just loses it. He like at first he's kind of being very demure, very mindful. He's being a little bit reserved. Um, and in a sense, I mean, he's still insulting Lord Shiva, but he's kind of just making these general like, oh, comments about like what proper manners are and proper gentle behavior. And Prabhupada makes the points in the purports that actually Lord Shiva is the epitome of gentleness, and Daksha is like the opposite. And then Daksha just gets more and more riled up. Like he's just at a certain point, I thought this was so funny. So he makes all these insults. He's saying Lord Shiva is like has eyes or face like a monkey, but Sati's eyes are like those of like a deer, a baby deer. And Prabhupada also says in the purports that Daksha was envious of Lord Shiva from the beginning. Like he was actually resentful that Lord Brahma asked Daksha or arranged that Daksha's daughter Sati would get married to Lord Shiva. So he was already resentful, and he really didn't like that Lord Shiva, the way he dressed, his associates, everything like that. Yeah, he just thought it was improper. So first he starts insulting him in that way and saying, um, oh, this is actually the proper etiquette, and it's kind of indirect. And then he starts to go into like, you just have a face like a monkey's, like it's just getting to like a like crazy angry place where he's not even. coming up with like clever things to say. And then this is the part I found really funny. He like he's gonna curse Lord Shiva, so he goes and like washes his mouth and washes his hands. Like he's really getting ready that he so much so that he's like washing his mouth and hands. I thought that was so funny. And then yeah, and then he curses Lord Shiva. And then Lord Shiva's mate, Lord Shiva's associate, Nandishvara, then turns around and curses Daksha. And Lord Shiva was not offended really severely. Like he was just keeping his cool, but Nandishvara went off and then cursed Daksha that he'll have to get the head of a goat. And and then we find with Daksha later the whole pastime with him and Narada Muni that Narada Muni has his sons, this first batch of sons, the Haryashvas, and yeah, notices like, oh, they're performing material austerities. We should dovetail this in Krishna's service and have them perform spiritual austerities and not generate progeny and be brahmacharis. And then, so he does that once, and then Laksha has another group of sons. Narada Muni does the same thing, and then he curses Narada Muni. You won't be able to, yeah, stay in one place for long. So Narada Muni then is traveling all over the universe. But yeah. So anyway, I remember at the end of year retreat, uh, what do we call that? And is it like the recharge festival? Yeah, at the end of the year in New Zealand, Dave Maharaj was giving lectures on these verses, and everybody's asking like just, kind of deep and philosophical questions and this and that. And then one Mataji was like, it was about the pastime of Daksha and Narada Muni. And she was like, so did Daksha have a goat's head this whole time? Like this whole pastime? And he's like, no. Anyway, I'll just stop there and would love to hear anybody's comments or realizations. Hare Krishna. Madhu.
Right, Bo, thanks for the class. I only caught the last bit of it, but just on this pastime of Daksha and Shiva and how Daksha was like definitely envious and definitely it's like finding fault in Lord Shiva, but then just got to a certain point and like lost it and just like totally went off on him and got really angry. So I was wondering how like if you're noticing like in myself, I notice I find faults often in devotees. Um, and then try and dovetail them. But then at a certain point, it might just like start brewing into like this unnecessary anger towards the person. So how do you just like get rid of that in general and or yeah, just stop it from going too far?
Yeah, thanks for your question. I mean, right off the bat, I'm sure you're already thinking the same thing. Envy is indirect appreciation like that. But I know you've heard that many times, which is definitely true. One thing that and I was going to talk about this, but ran out of time. One thing that I've noticed uh time and time again in my spiritual life and just a lot recently that I feel like Krishna is putting like the final nail in the coffin of this point is that anytime I don't even think that I'm fault finding, but I'm just like, oh, why isn't this devotee doing this or that? Or like they're not up to some kind of devotional standard that I'm holding them at in my mind that they don't even know about or whatever. So inevitably, that same thing that I'm like meditating on, that I'm thinking, oh, why don't they do this? Let's just say like, oh, this devotee uh, why don't they ever come to Mangalarti, or why don't they ever um, read, or why are they unclean, or something, whatever we might think. Inevitably, give it a couple weeks, I will be doing the exact same thing. Like, whereas I wouldn't have like done it before, but it's like I mean, part of it is like, I really think Krishna is like majorly trying to teach me a lesson, but even from the like, uh, yeah, taking that personal reciprocation out of it. Just where attention goes, energy flows. So like if we're thinking about something and it is like a meditation, um, then we're just going to adopt those qualities, which is why just for even if we're like in my case, I'm not thinking, oh, I want to be non-envious because I don't want to hurt this other person, or like they're actually such a good devotee. Even for our own selfish interest, we should not fall find or yeah, get really angry or disturbed, because those qualities, whatever it is that we're seeing, is just going to come back on us. So just for like a purely selfish motivation, which is my main motivation at this point, I'm like, oh my God, I really just gotta start like seeing the good in devotees. So yeah, so then it does ultimately arrive at that point of, yeah, just just appreciate, honestly, instead of and we can take that exact thing that we're well, if it's just like envy, if it's like, oh my God, they, I don't know, we're just envious because somebody's smarter than us or more pretty or whatever, like that sometimes is very obvious to see, then we can just appreciate that person for those qualities and how they're using it actually in Krishna's service, and how we're like, wow, I should really learn how to use these things in Krishna's service too. Um, or if it's, yeah, just like a fault finding thing, then counteracting it. And I think it takes practice too, counteracting it by finding some other things. Maybe it's not related to that point. Finding some other things that you do appreciate about this person, or what I've been trying to do recently is really like zoom out, because whenever we fault find, whenever it's to devotees, actually, it's usually such like we have like a microscope and we're like, look at this little, did anybody notice this, like, tiny thing or whatever, like that they actually have a little like pimple on their nose. But if we actually zoom out and we're like, oh, but let me just look at the life of this devotee and how much, if they're a new devotee, how much they've actually changed their life, new or old devotee, how much they've actually changed their life to dedicate themselves to the service of Krishna in whatever capacity that might be. So I've found it very helpful to like, instead of getting sucked into these little details, like the spots on the moon, zoom out and see, don't miss the forest for the trees, don't miss how much they're sacrificing just for these little things. So, is any of that helpful?
Yeah, super nice points. Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything to add on that from what they do or realizations?
I'd just like to mention that across the years of my devotional career, my experience has been precisely what you described, that you find some fault in another individual, somehow or other, by Krishna's arrangement. You wind up getting to find out what it's like to be in their position. You go through exactly the same thing. I've seen it a million times. It never fails. It evidently it's a standard means by which we are instructed.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, it's nice to hear ahead of time so that I don't have to keep repeating and then eventually find out, oh, this is a thing. So I really appreciate that. Anybody else have any comments? Okay. Oh, and there's the conch. Grantar Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ki jai.
He was staying on the back and separating the instinct and separation. She got was stand up for the travel, the beach, and not what's happening. It was a lower significant thing, and nobody applied. He had very that as he some was a board of the game. He ran. Child, we have to have a video of how to get Tamaiki jara Namnamaiki jara Mantiki jara what's jara since Dhamma jara Shishkin Shana Devi jara Sisiso Vitashan Dergi jara Shikita Davitan jara Tikalago all religions all religions are surrounding all religions are surrounding all religions all religions so they have Scotland's go ahead. Millions of years of their lives. Turn that excuse years of war. For me, to say that it's time and age. Various suicides have much made us with kind of moments for those suicides. Very is the news. We this is happening to the with regards to